What if everything you thought you knew about the royal family's ironclad composure was shattered in a single, devastating second? What if the quietest, most disciplined royal, the one who spent decades hiding in the shadows, silently carrying the weight of the monarchy, finally snapped on national television and admitted a truth so painful, it sent shockwaves directly through the gates of Buckingham Palace? Prince Edward sat down for what was supposed to be a polished, routine anniversary interview, surrounded by silver cutlery and pristine oil paintings. But instead of delivering rehearsed soundbites and practiced smiles, he did the unthinkable. He broke protocol, choked back tears, and looked directly into the camera lens with raw, unfiltered agony. With his voice trembling and his eyes glossy with unspoken grief, Edward confessed that he had completely failed his mother's sacred, dying wish. This was not a PR-approved statement. This was not a carefully drafted speech vetted by palace advisors. This was an explosive, soul-bearing confession from a man who had carried a crushing secret for years and simply couldn't hold it in for another second. He revealed a heartbreaking warning given to him by Queen Elizabeth II on her deathbed. A truth that exposes every crack, every betrayal, and every hidden war currently tearing the royal family apart. Stay tuned, because what Edward revealed next will change the way you look at the monarchy forever. To truly understand the seismic shift caused by Prince Edward's unprecedented breakdown, we have to pull back the curtain on decades of carefully guarded palace history. For more than 50 years, the House of Windsor operated under a single, unyielding golden rule, famously championed by the late Queen Elizabeth II. Never complain, never explain. It was a doctrine designed to project absolute invincibility. No matter how deep the personal fractures grew, no matter how toxic the internal rivalries became, the public was meant to see only a united front. Stoic, composed, and utterly unflappable. For his entire life, Prince Edward was the absolute gold standard of this royal doctrine. As the youngest child of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, Edward occupied a unique position within the institution. He wasn't the direct heir carrying the crushing weight of the crown like his elder brother Charles. Nor was he the charismatic, headline-grabbing figure embroiled in relentless public scandals. While the rest of his family dominated global tabloids, from the explosive, bitter disintegration of Charles and Diana's marriage to the catastrophic public fallout surrounding Prince Andrew, Edward quietly carved out a life defined by discretion, discipline, and absolute loyalty to the crown. He became known as the Forgotten Prince, the quiet anchor who never made waves, never gave controversial interviews, and never aired the family's dirty laundry. He married Sophie Rhys-Jones in 1999, and together they built a quiet, steady life at Bagshot Park, intentionally steering clear of palace politics and tabloid warfare. While others fought for prominence, Edward accepted his role in the background. He was the dependable son who showed up, cut the ribbons, completed his patronages, and retreated silently into the shadows. He built his entire identity around being the one royal who would never embarrass his mother or jeopardize the stability of the institution. However, behind the pristine gates and polished marble corridors of Buckingham Palace, an entirely different reality was taking shape. One that Edward watched unfold from the front row with growing despair. Over the last decade, the firm began to fracture at a rate never before seen in modern history. The bitter, highly publicized exit of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle shattered the illusion of family harmony, exposing deep-seated paranoia, racial tensions, and systemic isolation within the palace walls. The sudden death of Prince Philip in 2021 removed the family's fierce disciplinarian, leaving a power vacuum that inflamed internal rivalries. Then came the ultimate blow: the passing of Queen Elizabeth II in September 2022. The late monarch was not just the head of state. She was the emotional glue holding a deeply fractured family together. Her death removed the final barrier preventing total warfare. Almost overnight, the internal dynamics transformed into a battleground. King Charles III ascended the throne with an aggressive strategy to streamline the monarchy, cutting off extended family members, stripping titles, and prioritizing cold, clinical efficiency over emotional ties. Meanwhile, Prince William was thrust into the role of Prince of Wales, caught in an agonizing tug-of-war between his rigid duty to his father's new reign and his own private desire to protect his wife, Kate Middleton, and their children from the relentless pressure of the spotlight. Thousands of miles away in California, Prince Harry continued to lob verbal missiles at the institution through explosive memoirs and tell-all interviews, further deepening a feud that seemed entirely beyond repair. Through every single piece of this chaotic turmoil, Prince Edward remained silent. He watched his brothers stop speaking to each other. He watched his nephews drift into open hostility. He watched the warmth, laughter, and genuine affection that once filled Windsor Castle vanish, replaced by clinical strategy, legal non-disclosure agreements, and hyper-managed public relations campaigns. To the outside world, Edward appeared completely indifferent, maintaining a calm demeanor at public engagements. In reality, leaked reports from high-ranking palace insiders indicate that Edward was slowly suffocating under the weight of his own silence. Friends close to the Duke of Edinburgh reveal that he was growing increasingly tormented by a deep, agonizing sense of guilt. He wasn't just a passive bystander watching his family break apart. He was carrying a private burden, a final directive given to him by his mother in her dying hours that he felt completely powerless to execute. For years, the public assumed that the quiet prince was simply content with his comfortable, low-profile existence. No one realized that his silence was actually a pressure cooker, quietly building up steam with every public statement, every icy family reunion, and every bitter briefing leaked to the press. The stage was set for a confrontation, but no one, not the palace communications team, not King Charles, and certainly not the British public, could have anticipated that the quietest royal was about to blow the entire institution's secrets wide open. The shattering explosion finally occurred inside the grand drawing room of Buckingham Palace during what was supposed to be a tightly controlled, highly scripted documentary feature marking a historic royal milestone. The setup was textbook palace public relations. Pristine silver tea sets glinting under soft studio lighting, historic oil paintings of past monarchs carefully positioned in the background, and a seasoned broadcast journalist asking gentle, pre-approved questions designed to celebrate the late Queen's lasting legacy. Prince Edward sat in a gilded velvet armchair, his wife Sophie sitting just inches away on a nearby settee, serving as his silent emotional anchor. For the first 20 minutes, the interview proceeded exactly as palace aides had meticulously rehearsed. Edward delivered polished, measured responses about duty, continuity, and public service. But then the journalist veered slightly off script, asking a seemingly innocuous, sentimental question. Your Royal Highness, looking back at your mother's legendary reign, what did she cherish above all else when the cameras were turned off? That was the precise second the atmosphere in the room visibly shifted. A heavy, suffocating silence descended over the crew. Edward didn't answer right away. Instead, he dropped his head, staring blankly at his hands. When he looked back up, the practiced royal composure was completely gone. His voice dropped to an unsteady whisper, trembling with an intensity that stunned the camera operators. She cherished her family, Edward began, his eyes growing glassy. More than the crown, more than the duty. She used to look at us at Balmoral and say, without love, all of this gold and history means nothing. The journalist nodded, preparing to transition to the next topic, assuming Edward was simply delivering a sweet, emotional homage. But Edward didn't stop. He couldn't. You see, Edward continued, his chest heaving as tears began to spill over his eyelashes, uncontrolled and unedited. There is something I have never spoken about. Something she whispered to me at Balmoral when she knew her time was drawing near. She called me to her bedside. She took my hand in hers, and her voice was so frail, so tired. The film crew froze. High-ranking palace press officers standing behind the monitor suddenly straightened up, panic flashing across their faces. One aide frantically motioned with her hands for the director to cut the feed, but the cameras kept rolling. Edward was completely lost in the memory, blind to the panic unfolding around him. She looked into my eyes. Edward revealed, his voice cracking violently. And she said, Edward, the crown will outlive all of us. But I fear it will divide those who wear it from those who serve it. Then, she made me make a sacred promise. She didn't ask me to defend the institution. She didn't ask me to preserve the press strategy. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and whispered, protect the heart of this family, Edward. Promise me you won't let them destroy each other. Edward paused, wiping a tear from his cheek with a trembling hand, before looking directly into the camera lens, and by extension, directly at the millions of citizens across the nation. And I sit here today, looking at what we have become, and I have to tell the world. I failed her. I failed my mother's dying wish. The entire room gasped. An assistant producer in the back began silently weeping. Sophie reached forward and firmly gripped Edward's shaking hand, her own eyes brimming with tears, but she made no attempt to stop him. Edward was pouring out decades of repressed agony. I watch my brother Charles carrying a crushing burden he can hardly share, Edward confessed, airing the family's deepest wounds without a shred of royal filter. I see William trapped between cold, uncompromising duty, and his desperate desire for personal peace. I see Harry, thousands of miles away across an ocean, trying to build a life out of the ashes of a home he felt forced to abandon. And I ask myself every single night, what happened to the warmth that held us? What happened to the laughter in these corridors? We spent so long hiding behind protocol and duty that we forgot how to be human. We built walls to keep the world out, but all we did was lock ourselves in separate, freezing rooms. This wasn't just a breakdown. It was an absolute demolition of the palace's entire operational narrative. Edward directly attacked the institution's sacred, keep calm and carry on mantra, declaring publicly that the palace's obsession with secrecy and cold perfection was the very poison killing the family from the inside out. Within minutes of the broadcast airing, leaked internal messages from the palace press office began flooding social media channels. An anonymous source inside the Royal Communications Department leaked an urgent, high-priority email chain to prominent royal correspondents. The subject line read simply, Crisis Red, Unapproved Broadcast Content. The leaked messages reveal that palace officials were in a state of absolute, frantic meltdown, desperately scrambling to figure out if they could legally censor or recall the footage before global networks picked it up. On X, formerly Twitter, hashtags like hashtag Prince Edward Confession, hashtag The Forgotten Prince, and hashtag Royal Heartbreak exploded to the top of worldwide trending lists within 60 seconds. Millions of posts flooded the internet as viewers posted clipped videos of Edward's tear-filled admission. He just said what everyone knew but no one had the courage to say, one viral tweet read, accumulating over 200,000 retweets in under an hour. This isn't a royal talking. This is a heartbroken son. However, just as the nation was processing the sheer emotional weight of Edward's public confession, the first massive, jaw-dropping twist hit the press, a revelation so explosive that it transformed an emotional breakdown into a catastrophic institutional scandal. Leaked metadata from the recording crew, confirmed by a high-level whistleblower within the broadcasting network, revealed a shocking detail. Prince Edward's tearful breakdown was not a spontaneous, heat-of-the-moment lapse in judgment. 2 hours before the interview was scheduled to take place, Prince Edward had secretly instructed the documentary's executive producer to turn off the palace's live monitoring feed to the press office rooms. He had deliberately orchestrated the environment so that Buckingham Palace press aides would be completely unable to cut the transmission or shut down the recording when he delivered his devastating confession. He had set a trap for the institution, ensuring his mother's final words and his own confession were recorded beyond the reach of palace censors, knowing it would cause an irreversible, nuclear detonation at the very heart of the monarchy. The revelation that Prince Edward had intentionally bypassed palace censors sent shockwaves radiating through the corridors of power, accelerating the crisis into a full-scale institutional nuclear war. What had initially appeared to be a heart-wrenching moment of personal grief was now understood by palace insiders as a calculated, desperate rebellion against the monarchy's iron grip on public narrative. Within 6 hours of the broadcast, emergency crisis meetings were convened across multiple royal residences. At Balmoral, King Charles III reportedly summoned his top legal strategists and senior communications advisors for an emergency video conference. According to high-ranking sources within the civil service, the king's reaction was immediate and unforgiving. Charles viewed Edward's orchestrated breach of protocol not merely as an embarrassing emotional lapse, but as an unforgivable act of high treason against his crown. The king was incandescent with rage, leaked an anonymous royal courtier close to the sovereign. He kept repeating that sympathy is a poison that makes the monarchy look weak, fragile, and incompetent. To Charles, Edward hadn't just cried on television. He had publicly handed ammunition to Republicans, critics, and anti-monarchist movements across the globe. Queen Camilla reportedly attempted to intervene, urging Charles to exercise caution and pointing out that the public's response to Edward was overwhelmingly compassionate. She warned him that taking harsh, punitive measures against the late Queen's favorite son would cause public sentiment to turn viciously against the king. But Charles remained steadfast. To him, institutional authority was non-negotiable. Meanwhile, the global digital landscape was erupting in unprecedented fashion. Across social media platforms, verified royal commentators, Hollywood celebrities, and political figures engaged in furious, multi-sided warfare. On X, a single thread posted by a former royal biographer dissecting Edward's interview amassed over 40 million impressions in under 12 hours. Hashtag Team Edward began trending in over 30 countries, with users framing the Duke of Edinburgh as a tragic hero who sacrificed his standing to honor his mother's true memory. Conversely, Royalist traditionalists launched aggressive smear campaigns under the hashtag Traitor Edward, accusing him of undermining his brother's fragile reign for personal sympathy and attention. Industry reaction was equally swift and severe. International news anchors abandoned their planned lineups to host hour-long emergency panels analyzing the constitutional ramifications of Edward's statements. Veteran broadcasters openly questioned whether the House of Windsor could survive such an explicit internal indictment. Behind closed doors at Buckingham Palace, the communication strategy was shifting from damage control to complete isolation. Orders were quietly handed down to systematically erase Prince Edward and Duchess Sophie from upcoming official royal itineraries. Scheduled appearances were abruptly cancelled under the thin guise of routine schedule adjustments. The palace machine was moving swiftly to freeze out the quiet prince, shutting him off from the very institution he had spent 6 decades serving. Yet, just as the palace appeared to be regaining its footing and suppressing the immediate fallout, a second, far more catastrophic reveal dropped. One that threatened to permanently sever the royal family's remaining ties. Journalists at a major national Sunday publication received an encrypted leak containing a private audio recording captured in the immediate aftermath of the interview. The audio, recorded by a rogue room microphone that had been left running after the camera stopped, captured a tense, hushed conversation between Prince Edward and Duchess Sophie in the drawing room before palace officials escorted them out. On the tape, Sophie can be heard asking in a breathless whisper, "Edward, do you think Charles will ever forgive you for doing this?" Edward's response, captured with chilling clarity, sent a wave of utter panic through the royal establishment. "I don't care about Charles's forgiveness anymore," Edward replied, his voice cold and resolute. "Because this interview was only the first part. I didn't just tell the world she gave me a promise, Sophie. I kept the evidence." The audio cut out seconds later, but the implication was devastatingly clear. Prince Edward was not operating on emotion alone. He possessed physical, documented proof. Written journals, private letters, or recorded deathbed conversations. Left behind by Queen Elizabeth II, detailing her explicit warnings and true desires for the future of her family. The quiet, forgotten prince had not merely broken his silence. He had armed himself with a secret archive of royal truths, waiting for the precise moment to pull the trigger. And as the audio leak spread like wildfire across global media networks, a terrifying question gripped the nation. What else did the late Queen tell Edward? And how much more was he willing to reveal to destroy the palace's carefully constructed wall of lies? The release of the leaked audio recording acted like a match dropped into a powder keg, igniting an explosive wave of global media frenzy, digital warfare, and deep cultural division. Within hours, the narrative shifted from a simple story of royal emotional vulnerability to an intense, high-stakes psychological war between the traditionalist establishment and an awakening public demanding total transparency. Across the United Kingdom and around the globe, public opinion fractured along fierce, uncompromising lines. On one side stood millions of ordinary citizens who viewed Prince Edward not as a royal rebel, but as an authentic human being who had dared to break through centuries of cold, artificial protocol. Outside the iron gates of Buckingham Palace, an unprecedented scene began to unfold. Despite cold weather and heavy rain, thousands of people gathered, not to protest, but to leave massive piles of floral tributes, handwritten cards, and glowing candles directly dedicated to Prince Edward and Duchess Sophie. Many of the notes left at the palace gates carried deeply personal, emotional messages. One handwritten card that went viral on Instagram read, "Thank you, Prince Edward, for reminding us that love matters more than any crown. You didn't fail her, you honored her." Another note simply stated, "The quiet prince turned out to be the bravest of them all." Online, digital platforms became intense battlegrounds. Fan pages, casual observers, and celebrity influencers engaged in aggressive debates that dominated social media algorithms for days. On TikTok, videos analyzing Edward's micro-expressions during the interview and playing loop-ed edits of his emotional breakdown generated over 500 million cumulative views under hashtags like #EdwardSpokeTheTruth and #RoyalConfession. High-profile public figures and celebrities openly took sides. Popular television personalities, mental health advocates, and Hollywood stars posted passionate messages praising Edward for standing up against emotional suppression and highlighting the toxic nature of forced family silence. However, the backlash from royal traditionalists, conservative commentators, and staunch monarchists was equally swift, calculated, and relentless. On major news broadcasts and conservative opinion shows, veteran royal correspondents launched scathing attacks on Edward's character, labeling his unapproved confession a despicable act of self-indulgence and a direct betrayal of his reigning monarch. Prince Edward has completely forgotten his duty, declared one prominent royal biographer during a heated live broadcast on national news. The monarchy operates on stability, restraint, and selfless service. By crying on international television and hinting at secret deathbed archives, Edward has lowered the royal family to the level of cheap reality television. He has inflicted a severe, self-serving wound on King Charles at a time when the crown desperately requires dignity and absolute unity. Inside the entertainment and media industries, the shockwaves triggered a massive bidding war. Executive producers at major global streaming platforms and international publishing houses reportedly began quietly reaching out to representatives close to Bagshot Park, offering astronomical, multi-million-dollar deals for exclusive documentary rights or a tell-all memoir detailing the late Queen's private final months. Broadcast networks cleared their primetime scheduling to air daily special reports analyzing every single syllable of the leaked audio recording, with forensic audio experts and body language analysts scrutinizing every detail to decipher what evidence Edward possessed. Within the royal establishment itself, the reaction was characterized by deep paranoia, panic, and an immediate closing of ranks. High-ranking courtiers at Buckingham Palace and Clarence House were reportedly ordered to conduct sweeping internal audits to identify potential whistleblowers within the royal household. Security protocols around private royal archives were instantly tightened, and staff members were forced to re-sign strict non-disclosure agreements under threat of immediate termination and legal action. Yet, despite the palace's aggressive attempts to project absolute control, internal leaks revealed a house deeply divided against itself. Reports surfaced that Prince William was secretly deeply conflicted over his father's harsh stance. Sources close to Kensington Palace revealed that William had watched his uncle's interview multiple times in private, quietly expressing to close friends that Edward had articulated the exact emotional rot that many within the younger generation of royals had felt for years. Meanwhile, from across the Atlantic, representatives for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle reportedly observed the unfolding chaos with intense focus, recognizing that the very foundational arguments they had raised years prior were now being validated by the most dutiful, low-profile royal in modern history. The nation was now completely split. Was Prince Edward a courageous truth-teller breaking a toxic cycle of silence to fulfill a mother's sacred final wish? Or was he a dangerous rogue agent, whose emotional outburst threatened to destabilize the entire constitutional architecture of the monarchy? As public debates raged, one fact became undeniably clear. The palace could no longer rely on its old playbook of silent dismissal. The public was hooked, the media was relentless, and the entire world was waiting in suspense to see what move the quiet prince would make next. Just as the world believed the drama had reached its absolute climax, a final, earth-shattering twist emerged from the quiet sanctuary of Bagshot Park. One that completely inverted the entire narrative and proved that the war for the soul of the British monarchy was only just beginning. For 3 days following the explosive broadcast, Prince Edward remained entirely sequestered inside his Berkshire estate, refusing all phone calls from Buckingham Palace and ignoring official summonses issued by King Charles's private secretaries. To the public and the press, it appeared as though Edward had retreated into isolation, bracing himself for the inevitable institutional punishment heading his way. Royal biographers were already preparing obituaries for his public career, assuming he would be quietly stripped of his military patronages and banished from public life forever. They were dead wrong. Late on a rainy Thursday evening, an emergency transmission was intercepted by independent intelligence analysts monitoring high-level communications between royal estates. Encrypted data packet had been routed directly from Bagshot Park to 3 specific locations simultaneously. The personal legal team of Prince William at Kensington Palace, Prince Harry's private legal counsel in Montecito, California, and the private office of the Archbishop of Canterbury. The contents of that data packet were not a surrender. It was a formal, legally binding decree written and signed by Queen Elizabeth II just 48 hours before her death in September 2022, witnessed and notarized by her most trusted private legal advisors. The document, titled the Windsor Family Reconciliation Mandate, contained an extraordinary constitutional clause that had been deliberately concealed from King Charles, Prince William, and the public for nearly 4 years. Under the explicit terms of the late Queen's final directive, Prince Edward was granted full, sole, and unchallengeable authority over the management of the royal family's private, non-state personal estate and family trusts, effectively stripping King Charles of financial leverage over his siblings and nephews. But the financial control was only the surface of the reveal. The true shockwave lay in the final, handwritten paragraph of the mandate, written in the late monarch's distinct, elegant script. Queen Elizabeth II had explicitly authorized Edward to convene a private, closed-door family council, bypassing the sovereign's official authority entirely. If he ever judged that the emotional unity of the family was in fatal jeopardy. More critically, the mandate stipulated that if the sovereign refused to participate in good faith to heal the family rift, Prince Edward was legally empowered to release the late Queen's private, unedited audio diaries directly to the public domain. Edward had not just given an interview. He had activated a ticking time bomb designed by Queen Elizabeth II herself to force her children to reconcile, using the ultimate threat of total transparency against her own throne. Within minutes of the document's verification, emergency lights were seen burning late into the night across every major royal residence. Rumors began circulating furiously through political corridors that King Charles had called an emergency midnight meeting with the Prime Minister, realizing that his youngest brother held the ultimate checkmate over his reign. Meanwhile, a single, cryptic post appeared on Prince Edward's official charitable trust website, a plain black screen containing only 7 words typed in stark white lettering. The silence is broken. The council awaits. The nation stood frozen on the edge of a precipice. The quiet, forgotten prince had not broken down out of weakness. He had executed the late Queen's final, masterstroke trap to save her family from destroying themselves. But with King Charles backing into a corner, Prince William caught in the middle, and Prince Harry holding the key to the California archive, the ultimate question remains unanswered. Will the royal family gather at Bagshot Park to finally face the painful truth, or will King Charles fight back to protect the crown, even if it means burning the House of Windsor to the ground? The clock is officially ticking, and the next move will change history forever. Now, I want to pass the question directly to you, because this isn't just about headlines anymore. This is about the true legacy of the royal family. Was Prince Edward right to break decades of protocol to honor his mother's emotional final wish? Or did he go too far by putting personal feelings above his loyalty to the crown? Did he execute a brilliant, courageous masterstroke to force a broken family to reconcile? Or has he accidentally unleashed a crisis that could destroy the monarchy for good? We want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment right now with your take on this jaw-dropping situation. Are you #Team Edward for standing up for the truth? Or do you support King Charles in protecting the authority of the throne? Let's spark a real debate in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep, high-stakes dive into royal family dynamics, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Crown Watch, and turn on all notifications. We are tracking this story around the clock, and the moment that secret family council convenes at Bagshot Park, you'll be the very first to know. The drama is far from over, and trust me, you will not want to miss our explosive next update. Thank you for watching. Keep the conversation going down below, and we'll see you in the next video.